Whom the Gods Fear by Wdowski. Chapter 8. Back on board the Marco Polo, Glenn was rudely awoken by a banging on his cabin hatch. "Jaeger, get up!" Rebecca Stern screamed through the hatch. Her nasal screech reverberated through his private sanctuary, shaking him out of his bed better than any fire alarm could. "What the hell is it?" Glenn opened his hatch. "What the hell is it? Are you kidding?" Rebecca stormed into his cabin, shoving an accusing finger into his face. "I forbid you to allow the venture to continue on to Shing IV. First of all, I don't take orders from you. Second of all, get your damn finger out of my face. Third of all, what do you expect me to do? Turn the rail cannons on them?" Rebecca stood in silent agreement to his suggestion to use the rail cannons as he lowered her finger from his face. "Oh, come on. Even you can't be that low. You don't have to destroy them, just knock out their hyper-engines. If you don't, they could arrive at Shing IV before us, and perhaps interfere with my accomplishing the re-establishment of diplomatic relations with the Shingese. Rebecca, we are over 20 light-years from Earth. If only on sublight engines, it would take the venture over 13.5 thousand years to return home. That is, if they can get up to 1,000,000 miles per hour. Our taking out their hyper-engines would be the same as killing them." Calming himself down, he gently guided Rebecca out of his cabin. "I have a suggestion. Why don't you instead use your very wonderful and professional diplomatic skills to persuade JD to return to Earth? I am going back to sleep." He closed his hatch behind her. He only got about an hour's sleep before the communications officer was ringing his cabin that he had a ship-to-ship video communication. Turning on his four-armcom, an uncharacteristic, non-smiling JD materialized on it. "Whoa, Glenn, babe, I thought you were my bud." Glenn immediately realized that Rebecca took his suggestion to use her charming diplomatic skills. JD, as annoying as she is right. Perhaps for the wrong reasons, but she is still correct that you should not proceed to Shing IV. "Glenn, I promised these people an interstellar trip to an exotic alien world, photographs with Shingese natives, extraterrestrial scenic, natural wonders, and alien souvenirs to bring back to all their friends, family members, and clients." Even more so out of character, JD leaned in closer to the camera and continued in a dry, serious whisper. "Glenn, if I do not deliver, these people will sue my pants off." Glenn could tell that JD was seriously worried, but he also felt a sigh of relief that JD was for the first time talking frankly with him, without all the carnival barking. He was finally sounding like the son of a multi-billionaire. "They won't be able to sue you. Rebecca is a State Department ambassador. You are simply following a government directive. Granted, due to your guaranteed 7th constitutional right. Freedom of travel. You may not be legally obligated to heed her order, but you're choosing to follow the directive of an EG State Department diplomat. I am very confident it will protect you from any serious lawsuits." "Do you really think so?" asked JD. "I am sure of it. At best, you may just have to refund your passengers' money for this trip, or offer them at least a free cruise to another destination, or for a trip to Shing IV after relations are officially re-established with the Shingese." When JD heard the words refund and free cruise, he turned pale and broke out into a sweat. "Return their money?" "Yeah, just give them a refund or a voucher for a free cruise," suggested Glenn. "That's even worse. My father will disown me. He has always given me the freedom to do what I wanted, as long as whatever I did made a profit. I have to continue on. I just hope you and Ambassador Stern are wrong." JD signed off. The venture jumped an hour before the Polo was ready to make its next jump. When the Polo jumped to their next coordinates, the venture was already present and was only 11 hours away to make its next jump. JD was clearly not turning the venture back to Earth, and was continuing on to Shing IV. By the 7th jump, the venture was already 1 jump ahead of the Polo. When the Polo reached its last jump coordinates, before their final jump into the Shing system, they had had no contact with the venture for 2 days. Glenn could only hope that JD found the courage to face his father and do the right thing, returning the venture back to Earth. They were only 8 hours away from their jump into the Shing system. Glenn had requested a full science, military, and diplomatic teams meeting. Captain Rubel, Dr. Lopez, the ship's doctor, and Lieutenant Commander Wdowski attended, representing the ship's crew. The remaining crew members remained at their duty stations. The group was so large that the small conference room was not big enough to handle everyone. Both shuttles were launched and were alongside the Polo to make room for the meeting to be held in the hangar deck. A projection screen had been hung over the hangar doors. Tables were set with chairs for each science team. Rebecca and her assistants sat at one table. At the table across from them were Captain Mahan and Commander Granite with his gunnery tech team. Mahan's squad of Marines stood at attention behind them. Captain Rubel and his senior officers sat at the table in the center of the U-shaped configuration. All the tables faced inward toward the projection screen, and a podium to the front and left of the screen. Glenn and Landru sat at Captain Rubel's table. All the other tables were filled with the different science departments: astrophysics, exobiology, planetology, and chemistry. Everyone wore a small wireless microphone to be heard clearly in the meeting and through the ship's PA system. All the science team members were armed with forearm comms along with Wdowski, Granite, and Landru. The room settled down with chatter as Glenn walked to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen. Oh, and Rebecca Stern. Those that had the misfortune of encountering Ambassador Stern all laughed. Her two assistants had to bite their tongues to hold back their giggles to Glenn's opening. As you all know, we will be making our last jump in just a few hours, bringing us into the Shing star system near the orbital path of their furthest outer planet. I am hopeful that we will have a successful encounter with the Shingese, be able to re-establish peaceful contact with them, and hopefully find Captain Demi and his crew. We are also aware that we are uninvited guests and that the Shingese have broken off all relations with Earth. Either they are planning belligerence against Earth, or their feelings were genuinely hurt by the EGG's State Department. Glenn looked at Rebecca, hoping his point was sinking into her thick head. Glenn continued, I have called this meeting to bring everyone up to date about our present condition, about what we may expect, and to clarify our mission goals. I think we should first start with Professor Sonia Morningsun, lead planetologist. Dr. Morningsun. A very attractive Native American woman in her late 30s stood up from one of the science tables and gracefully walked across the space to the podium. She walked like a ballet dancer off stage. Her long legs led her way with stretched-out toes. Her steps were so soft and smooth it seemed as if she floated across the room. It was clear to Glenn she had studied more than just exoplanetary geology and atmospheres. In a highly soothing and articulate voice, she began her presentation as a three-dimensional image of a world appeared before the projection screen. Not upon it. The screen was used only as a clean backdrop for the hologram presentation. Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Shing IV is remarkably similar to Earth. Yet there are still major differences between the two Class A planets. To begin with, Earth is an A+ world where Shing IV is catalogued as an A- world. A- worlds. Rebecca challenged Dr. Morningsun. That sounds like a very prejudicial statement. A+ world means an Earth-like planet, best suited for human life. An A- world only means a world that humans can inhabit but would need minor life support assistance. Shing IV's atmosphere is breathable for humans, but is much thinner than Earth's. In higher altitudes where the Shingese still can breathe, we would need breathing apparatus for oxygen support. Their gravity is also denser than Earth's, even though it is actually a bit smaller. The gravitational pull on Shing IV makes humans feel 11% heavier than they would be back on Earth. Everything on their world would be 11% heavier to us. So the combination of Shing IV's thinner atmosphere and its stronger gravity would make a human pro ball player feel like an overweight weakling with severe asthma? Yes, not a very scientific description, but very accurate one, responded Dr. Morningsun. Shing IV also has another major difference from Earth. It is not tilted on its axis, meaning it does not have seasonal changes. The furthest northern and southern latitudes are in continuous winters. The temperate latitudes are cool to cold, but rarely cold enough for snow, while its tropical zones are always warm to hot. If not for its thinner atmosphere, its tropic zones would be much hotter than the Earth's tropic zones. Any questions? It seems strange that a world with a higher mass than Earth's would have a thinner atmosphere. Why would that be? Asked Lieutenant Commander Wdowski. It is much like the reason why the Earth's atmosphere is less dense than its sister world, Venus. The theory is that when the Moon collided into the Earth, in its earlier years, the Moon literally knocked off a large amount of Earth's atmosphere into space. This, luckily for us, gave the Earth a much less dense atmosphere than the unbearable, crushing, and heated atmosphere of Venus's. Shing IV has two large moons. We think she was struck twice at different times in her early history, in turn knocking off more of her atmosphere into space. Yet the moon hitting the Earth is theorized to be the reason why the Earth has a tilted axis. Yet you say Shing IV's axis is not tilted. Dr. Vern seemed confused. The theory is that Shing IV was likely knocked off its axis when it collided with its first moon, and when hit by the second moon, it was knocked back up to a non-tilting axis. Amazing. What are the odds of that happening? Actually quite high, but in a universe with so many worlds, still very probable. Any more questions? No one responded. In that case, I will hand the floor over to my good friend Doctor and Hogan.